So the other day, I finally had a chance to fulfill a lifelong ambition as an aviation enthusiast. Visit the Air and Space Museum. Fighter jets, biplanes, orbital craft. I was more turgid than Jared Fogle in a preschool parking lot for the preceding 3 days. So much so that I neglected to sleep the night before and slept through my alarm. And my eternally devout friends, of course, went without me. Devoid of other options, I did what everyone else does when they want to catch a glimpse of air in space. Turn to the PS4 game library. Let's see. Thief, Sniper Elite, Glitcher...
Kept you waiting, huh? We don't get fooled again. Don't get fooled again.
Ah, the phantom pain. Whatever else I may say in the review to follow, one fact will remain immutable. Metal Gear Solid 5, The Dream Child, is without exaggeration the most far-reaching in ambition, the most visionary, and mechanically speaking, the closest to an actual stealth title yet attempted by this celebrated series. A game that, whatever its failings, had the heaving Basonite balls to discard the tried and true walk-forward cutscene formula it could have printed money with well into the next decade in no other name than innovation. A point Koji Pro jackhammers the fuck home with a turbo-linear introductory sequence that distilled to its essence amounts to walk-forward cutscene, called the Guinness people. That may be a land speed record for quickest time from 0 to fuck yourself. In case the omnipresent J.J. Abrams lens flare and Hans Zimmer French horn farts didn't tip you off, contrary to his thoroughly undeserved repute, Hideo Kojima isn't a trendsetter. He's a trend follower. When the first MSX Metal Gear title dropped, it was, and still is, inundated by a hail of gaming publications mistakenly appraising it as the first stealth game in history, having done so nearly a decade after Castle Wolfenstein invented the very concept. When Metal Gear Solid's talky widescreen cutscenes were once again falsely appraised as the first truly cinematic experience in gaming, they were doing so in complete ignorance of the fact that Wing Commander pioneered the concept 8 years previously, and unlike Metal Gear Solid, with branching story paths. First 3D stealth game? Fuck, it wasn't even the first in 1998! And thanks to Thief the Dark Project, it's not the best that year either. As such, just in time for every game from Until Dawn to The Walking Dead to have already embraced the format as much as 5 years fucking previously, lo and behold, Metal Gear Solid 5 is the first title in the series to disseminate its eponymous phantom plot in purely episodic fashion. The problem? Well, beyond the masturbatory opening credits that often spoil who's in the fucking chapter.
Could it be that sniper? Quiet.
When condensed to mercifully brief mini-melodramas rather than the long-form pretentiousness parables traditionally associated with Metal Gear Solid, Hideo Kojima has unwittingly cast some very harsh, unflattering illumination on his self-evident deficiencies as a writer, namely, that he fucking isn't one! And before you shriek the word bias or point to my self-evident and admitted disdain for Kojima's ham-fisted histrionics, I'm far from alone in this. Agnes Kaku, a woman with actual creative writing credentials whose thankless task it was to translate Kojima's dribble in Metal Gear Solid 2, has stated more or less exactly the same thing, calling him a bargain basement Tom Clancy and arguing that he should delegate writing responsibilities to someone with more talent and less ego. While I'd love to link you to the article, lawyers, not from Konami, but directly from Kojima himself, called the website's host directly, pulling it from the web entirely. If only I'd saved the interview in its entirety. Look, when I say Kojima is a game designer, not a writer, I'm not referring to goofy goat fucks like cyborg ninjas, water-walking drag queen Draculas, or the discognizant briar of Alex Jonesian conspiratorial cunt wash
Hail Hydra!
that comprises the Metal Gear franchise's grade school political discourse. I'm talking basic shit. Beginning, middle, and fucking end. When you spread this maudlin muddlefuck over the course of one protracted pretense party, particularly one as gallingly linear as previous Metal Gear titles were, it's much easier to camouflage your narrative shortcomings by constructing an elaborate artifice where you're perpetually building to something huge. Trust me, you will like it. Even when, as is so often the case with this series, that moment never actually arrives. Godot ain't got shit on me waiting for this plot to move the fuck along.
Oh, snap.
But when you purposefully craft each lachrymose ladling into a slovenly succession of pseudo-stories, all of which shoulder an equal theoretical responsibility to stand on their own two amputated stumps, well, okay, where's my exposition? My rising action? My falling action? My denouement? The closest I come to a climax is when quiet mashes or feminist fun bags so hard together they bond on the subatomic level, not to mention the fact that the game just kind of ends. A narrative I might have been okay with outright ignoring if only the characters had picked up the fucking slack. While the new Snake is an eminently more talented performer than the gravel-gargling car-fucking-tune that was David Hayter,
Crap battle.
how's about letting him open his mouth and fucking confirm it once in a blue moon?
What is your favorite word, Kiefer? Nigger.
What did you write Kiefer Sutherland's script on, a gum wrapper? What are you being paid by the grunt? Master Tatsu was more avuncular.
Go. Play.
The Phantom Pain is less an open-world sandbox than an open-world litter box, a sepia suck-ass simulator with all the topographical variety of a fucking box turtle habitat, bulging at the balls with bitch work, a formula that initially impresses, and given the sheer enormity, how couldn't it, before that sobering moment of soul-crushing inevitability about a third of the way through the game when the honest player must quietly acknowledge that the reason Hideo Kojima has never made an open-world freeform sandbox before is because he is transparently fucking incapable of it. Games like GTA, Red Dead Redemption, and Oblivion thrived in the presence of variety, and games like Two Worlds and Assassin's Creed 3 utterly imploded in its absence. So some apologist asshat's gonna need to explain to me why when 99.5% of the myriad missions in Metal Gear Solid 5 are little more than a half dozen minor variations on break-in, gank shit, and bounce yo, we're giving out higher numbers than a fucking Enron speculator. And before you top-spin the fuck back with a trite reply of, well, you just described every stealth game ever, they all lack variety. Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, plucking piss ants through paper-mache walls to stop a Japanese general from gouging out his guts. Thief the Dark Project, literally descending into the mouth of hell to drop a demigod. You mean to tell me in a game that features a giant flaming death whale monging on traffic copters, the best Kojima can come up with is 31 flavors of Scout, Infiltrate, Grab Shit, Exfiltrate? And that's before even considering the game's terminal case of the rehash rickets, so let me make sure I'm crystal fucking clear on this. When Tenchu Z repeatedly recycled a half dozen negligibly altered configurations of the exact same fucking levels, pace-swilling noxious fanfucks were petitioning FromSoft for franchise rape counseling, but when the Phantom plot routinely reprocesses the same maps with the same objectives, often found in the same buildings, we're coughing up more tens than Count Von Count at a top-shelf titty bar?
You like this, don't you, baby?
I love it.
What double standard? But hey, at least there's gameplay I'd hasten to note is all but mimeographed, badly might I add, from the very same eminently superior Splinter Cell and Thief titles that Metal Gear's frothing fantards have in the past made it their 9-to-5 occupation to repeatedly disparage in favor of this subpar stealth 'em up. Hey, it's called the cult of Kojima, not the cult of consistency. I've said it before, where gameplay is concerned, Kojima is competent to outright good at every solitary thing that isn't stealth. If it's airdrops, weapon customization, base building, or collecting pervy posters, by Venus's vag, he's virtually without peer. But a Parkinson's-afflicted cameraman I can only assume was in fact a jackrabbit with the DTs, a woefully misguided sticky cover system with the reliability of an Xbox 360 under ideal conditions, and enemies with IQ numbers they could play the fucking Powerball with, do not a stealth title, let alone a perfect one, make. What you just witnessed happened within 5 minutes of my first fucking playthrough. Last year, I had the misfortune to review the abject travesty that was the 2014 reboot of the greatest stealth and, in my opinion, video game series of all time, Thief. As anyone who encountered the review in question will readily attest, I didn't just light into the game, I wore it like a fucking baseball glove. A year later, Project lead Stefan Raw is still picking buckshot shrapnel out of his ass. I impress this fact upon you so that you understand that what I have to say next is no fucking compliment. Over the course of Thief, I stood mystified as a guard passed so close during a failed pickpocket attempt, I all but smeared New Garrett's eyeshadow on his junk with narrated alert on master difficulty. I nearly collapsed a lung in spasmodic laughter when an enemy discovered my leather gimp-looking ass and gave chase, only to find himself physically incapable of circumnavigating a bottle at his feet. In all 9.5 trillion hours that it took for the RMS Titanic to smack the ocean floor, I never, for even one moment, witnessed anything approaching the aberrant, chest-slapping, pace-swilling, helmet bedecked, short bus, early dismissal, ooba-dee, ooba-da, life goes on, pants beshitting, butt-fucking stupidity I routinely observe from the AI in Metal Gear Solid 5. Tactical espionage excellence, 10 out of 10, my aching ass. 7 out of 10, my aching ass. But Razor Fist, I hear you shriek, it's not the semi-functional stealth that sells Metal Gear, it's the attention to detail. Well, you got me, amorphous asshole on the internet. From the smallest rat to the pervious pussy poster, nothing can dissuade Hideo Kojima from an unflagging, thankless commitment to the smallest detail. The final countdown! Oh, but the bells and whistles are polished to a fare thee well. Kojima, if you're so obviously entranced by pony rides, playing dress-up, and building Malibu Stacy's dream house, may I humbly suggest that the Barbie license is up for grabs. Stealth games need functional stealth, and copying your entire playbook right down to the grating lens flare from the barely-ass functional Blacklist is like cheating off Hannah Minx's SATs, and in both cases you'll wind up distracted by undulating titties. However hard the gale force winds of the hype hurricane blow, I'm convinced in the longer term, Metal Gear Solid's 5th entry, beyond simply blowing, will serve as a cautionary object lesson in the all-too-tempting pitfalls of kitchen sink game design. When you subvert the core gameplay for 9 billion unlockable outfits, goofy-ass weather balloons, tower defense, in short, a bunch of dicking around, you wind up with a game that's only fun to dick around with. And that's the Phantom plot in a nutsack. A bitchin'-ass Iron Maiden song that blows your socks off for the first 2 minutes until you realize there are 12,000 chorus repeats. Oh, but if the repetition and rehashes don't tickle your taint, not to worry, as the latter third of the game is only devoted to replaying the already habitually regurgitated side ops on hard to unlock the true final act of the game. Fuck you! Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you! This game sucks 12 Delta Burke asses through a coffee straw. I'm Razor Fist. Fuck you!
You are the target.